The late afternoon sun spilled over Maple Grove, the kind of small Missouri town where gossip traveled faster than the wind. I was in my office double-checking quarterly reports when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom Boyd, my husband Mark's older brother. Tom never texted me unless something was wrong. The message read, "Family gathering this Sunday at Dad's. Important. Don't tell Mark it's a surprise." I stared at it for a long second, the words glowing against the screen like a warning. My stomach tightened. In the Boyd family, surprises usually meant trouble. I thought about Diane, my mother-in-law, and her thin smile that never reached her eyes. Frank, my father-in-law, with his booming voice that could turn sharp in an instant. Lydia, the youngest, who always pretended to like me, but couldn't hide her sneer whenever Mark wasn't looking. For a family that preached about loyalty, they had a strange way of showing it. I walked into the kitchen where Mark was repairing the old coffee maker. "You heard from your dad lately?" I asked casually. He shook his head. "Not really." Why I hesitated, the text still open in my hand. Just curious. He smiled that gentle, worn-out smile that always made me forgive too easily. "If Dad's planning something, it's probably just another barbecue." He said it like it was the most normal thing in the world, but I knew better. Later that evening, I called my best friend Carla. She'd known me since high school, before I married into the Boyds, before I learned what living with control disguised as family looked like. When Diane calls something a family gathering, "It's never just dinner," Carla said flatly. "You sure you want to go?" I hesitated, then nodded even though she couldn't see me. If I don't show up, it'll look like I'm hiding something. Maybe this is their way of making peace. Carla snorted. "Sweetheart, toxic people don't make peace, they make tests." Her words lingered long after we hung up. I spent the next 2 days trying not to think about it. But at night, lying beside Mark, I watched him sleep his face, peaceful, unaware that something was brewing behind his back. I wondered if his silence was ignorance or survival. He'd always said they mean well, but I had seen how their good intentions chipped away at his confidence piece by piece. They drained him emotionally and financially. And me, I had learned to stay quiet, to smooth things over, to keep the peace. That was my mistake. By Sunday morning, the unease had grown roots. I dressed in a pale blue blouse, nothing too formal, nothing too casual. My hands shook slightly as I grabbed my car keys. The drive to the Boyd estate felt longer than usual. Maple trees lined the road, their leaves trembling in the breeze. My heart thudded louder with every mile. When I finally pulled into the gravel driveway, the house looked exactly as it always did, grand, cold, and silent. Tom's truck was parked beside Frank's old Ford. Lydia's silver sedan gleamed near the porch. I took a deep breath and stepped out. The air smelled like rain, heavy and metallic. As I walked up the steps, the front door creaked open before I could knock. Diane stood there wearing pearls and a smile too tight to be real. "Hannah," she said smoothly, "you made it. We've been waiting." The way she said we made my pulse spike. I stepped inside, feeling the air thicken around me. Every head in the living room turned my way. Tom, Lydia, Frank. Not a single smile among them, only the sound of the clock ticking loud and deliberate. And one thing missing, Mark. "Where's my husband?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Diane's eyes flickered, then she gestured toward the sofa. "Sit down, dear. We need to talk." Something in her tone made my skin crawl. My instinct screamed to turn around and leave, but I didn't. Not yet. Because deep down, I knew whatever this was, it wasn't a surprise. It was a setup, and I was about to walk straight into it. The Boyd estate sat on the edge of Maple Grove, a 2-story farmhouse wrapped in gray paint that had long lost its shine. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled up to the front porch. For a moment, I sat in the car, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching the curtains move slightly in the living room window. Someone was already watching me. I could almost feel their gaze pressing against the glass. I stepped out and straightened my blouse, pretending confidence I didn't feel. The air smelled faintly of motor oil and rain, the scent of an old barn that had seen too many storms. As I climbed the porch steps, the door opened before I could knock. Diane stood there, crisp in a cream sweater, lips painted too red. Her eyes scanned me like a scanner at a checkout line calculating cold. "Hannah," she said sweetly, You're right on time. Inside the living room was staged like a courtroom. The curtains were drawn. Every Boyd I knew sat in a semicircle, Frank in his worn recliner at the center, Tom leaning against the fireplace, Lydia with her legs crossed and arms folded, a smirk already on her face. The only person missing was Mark. "Where's my husband?" I asked. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Frank didn't answer. He nodded at Diane and she motioned toward the couch. "Sit down, dear. We need to talk." My pulse quickened. I stayed standing. "Talk about what Tom snorted. You'll see." The silence thickened until Frank reached for the folder on the coffee table. He slid it toward me with 2 fingers. "We need you to sign these," he said. I looked down. The papers were crisp, official, and cold. Divorce papers. For a second, I couldn't breathe. A low hum filled my ears as I stared at my name printed in bold letters beside Mark's. I let out a laugh, short, sharp, disbelieving. "You've got to be kidding." "This is for the best," Diane said, softly folding her hands in her lap. "You're a good woman, Hannah, but you don't fit into this family. You make Mark weak. He's been distracted for years." Lydia's smirk widened. "We're just trying to help him see it." I turned to Frank, my throat tightening. "Does Mark know about this?" He didn't flinch. "He's not here, and that's how it should be. We're trying to save him from unnecessary pain." "Unnecessary pain," I repeated. "You're ambushing me with divorce papers behind his back." Diane's smile didn't waver. "Sometimes hard things are done out of love." I felt something sharp and cold settle inside me. Not anger yet, but clarity. I thought about the nights I had stayed up balancing their family books, finding quiet ways to cover Frank's tax mistakes the years I'd kept Mark from seeing just how deep his brother's debts went. Every sacrifice, every silence, every time I swallowed my pride to keep peace, it all led here. "You really think you can decide for him?" I asked quietly. Frank leaned forward. "I think it's time we restored order. This family used to mean something before you came along." Lydia rolled her eyes. "Can we just get her to sign 'I have somewhere to be'?" The words snapped something inside me. I looked around the room at their smug faces at the staged civility masking rot. And I realized they weren't expecting a fight. They thought I would fold like always. I reached for my purse. The room shifted, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Diane's voice turned cautious. "Hannah." I pulled out a dark folder and set it on the table with a quiet thud. "Since we're doing paperwork," I said evenly, "I brought something too." Tom frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I met Frank's gaze, letting the silence stretch until it stung. "It means," I said, sliding the folder toward him, "you're not the only one who's been preparing." His hand froze halfway to the file. For the first time since I'd walked in, I felt something shift power. Cold, quiet, deliberate. They had no idea that the woman they tried to erase had already started writing her own ending. Frank's hand hovered over the folder I'd laid on the table, but he didn't open it. His eyes were sharp, suspicious. Diane leaned forward, her tone clipped. "What is this, Hannah?" "Some kind of stunt?" I stayed standing, keeping my voice calm. "You wanted to talk about family business, right? Then let's talk about it." Tom crossed his arms. "You've got nothing that concerns us." I smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised." The air in the room thickened, the old clock ticking louder with every second. Diane gestured toward the divorce papers. "We're not here to fight. We just want to make things easy for everyone, especially Mark. If you sign, we can finalize this quietly." I looked down at the papers again, then back at her. "You forged my husband's name on a loan and you're worried about things being quiet." Her expression faltered. "Excuse me," I turned toward Frank. "Last month, a $120,000 loan was opened under Mark's name. Same handwriting, same initials. Only problem is Mark didn't sign it." Frank's jaw tightened. "That's ridiculous." I opened my folder and pulled out a printed page. "Really? Because the bank's digital copy of the signature matches yours." For a moment, no one breathed. Diane's hand flew to her chest. "You're mistaken, dear." "No," I said softly. "I'm not. You used our house as collateral." Frank's voice boomed through the room. "You watch your tone, young lady." "Young lady!" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. I've been covering your mistakes for years, Frank. I've seen the fake invoices, the double entries, the way you hide losses behind your company's name. Tom slammed his hand on the armrest. That's enough. I met his glare. Oh, I'm not finished. Let's talk about your gambling debts, Tom, the ones Mark unknowingly paid off. Or Lydia's little online boutique that somehow manages to stay open despite losing thousands a month. Lydia's face reddened. You don't know what you're talking about. I leaned in slightly. Then maybe you can explain the transfers to a man named Derek Miles. Her mouth fell open. You? How Diane snapped, her voice trembling now. Hannah, that's enough. You're twisting things. I looked at her with something close to pity. No, Diane, I'm just finally telling the truth. Frank stood up, face flushed with anger. You don't come into my home and accuse us of crimes. Crimes, I said quietly. Your word, not mine. The clock ticked once, twice. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. It was as if the sky itself knew the storm had only begun. Frank jabbed a finger toward me. You think Mark will believe this nonsense? You're trying to drive a wedge between him and his family. I met his eyes, steady and unflinching. I don't have to drive a wedge, Frank. You built one yourself when you stole from him. Diane's voice broke. We were only trying to protect him. You wouldn't understand what family means. That word family landed like poison. Family doesn't manipulate. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't ambush someone with divorce papers and call it love. For the first time, they had no reply. Tom's face twisted, torn between rage and panic. Lydia looked away, chewing her lip. Diane's eyes glistened, but not from remorse, only fear. Frank's silence was the loudest of all. I gathered the papers back into my folder, the air around me humming with electricity. You wanted me gone, I said, my voice low. You thought you could erase me like a problem on your balance sheet. But you miscalculated. I stepped closer to Frank, close enough to see the sweat on his temple. You underestimated how much I know, and how much I'm willing to expose. The thunder cracked louder, shaking the windows. I turned toward the door. I'm leaving now, I said, pausing just long enough to watch fear flicker in their eyes. And when Mark asks what happened here today, I'll make sure he gets the truth, every number, every lie, every name. I walked out before they could answer. Behind me, the Boyd house finally went silent, the sound of power shifting, echoing in its walls. The road from the Boyd house to mine blurred past the windshield, but my mind wasn't on the drive. My pulse still thudded from what had just happened. They'd expected me to crumble. Instead, I'd dropped a folder full of proof into their laps. But I knew that wouldn't be the end of it. Families like the Boyds didn't give up, they circled back. By Monday, Mark still hadn't mentioned anything. It told me everything. They hadn't told him a word. They wanted control over the story as always. So I kept quiet too, but this time for strategy, not peace. I spent the next few days at my desk combing through spreadsheets, bank statements, and credit reports until my eyes ached. I had everything: emails, loan documents, signatures that didn't match payments marked miscellaneous that traced right back to Tom's gambling accounts. Each discovery stoked something in me that had slept for years, anger sharpened into purpose. When Thursday came, my phone rang. Diane. Hannah, dear, she said, too sweet, too calm. Frank thought maybe you'd like to come by again this weekend, just to clear the air. My hand tightened around the phone. Clear the air or rewrite history? There was a pause then, that perfect, practiced sigh. No need to be dramatic. Mark deserves a calm wife, not one stirring up trouble. I hung up before she could finish. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore, from restraint. That night, Mark walked in looking tired, his work boots leaving a faint trail of dust on the floor. He kissed my cheek and sat at the table. Mom called, he said quietly. She said you're upset. I looked at him for a long time. She invited me to a family discussion. He frowned. Yeah. About what? I waited, but he didn't seem to know. Mark, I said softly, if your family ever asked you to choose between them and me, what would you do? He smiled sadly. That's not fair, Hannah. They're my family. And I'm not. The silence between us stretched. He looked away. That was my answer. Saturday came fast. I drove back to the Boyd estate this time with a purpose. Inside, they were waiting again, the same semicircle of self-righteous faces. Diane stood when I entered. "Hannah," she said, "we can still settle this quietly. Just sign the papers. We'll help you move on." I set my purse on the table. "You should have read what was inside that folder," I said evenly. "Because this time it's not your story being told, it's mine." Frank's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." I smiled. "Am I?" I opened my bag again and pulled out a thick envelope, copies of every piece of evidence I had. I laid them out one by one, the forged loan, the hidden transfers, the emails. The sound of paper sliding against wood was deafening in the still room. Diane's smile cracked her fingers, twitching toward the documents. Tom muttered something under his breath, sweat gathering at his temples. Lydia shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "You think you can ruin this family?" Frank barked. "No," I said calmly. "You already did. I'm just documenting it." I leaned forward, my voice low but clear. "I gave you a chance to fix this quietly. You used that chance to humiliate me. Now I'm done protecting your lies." Diane's face drained of color. "What do you plan to do?" she whispered. "I plan," I said, gathering the papers neatly to tell the truth, "to Mark, to the bank, to anyone who asks." A chair scraped loudly against the floor as Tom stood. "You won't get away with this." I met his glare. "Tom, I already have the records. The moment you opened that loan in Mark's name, you handed me the rope you're now hanging from." The room fell silent again, heavy and suffocating. For years they'd seen me as quiet, pliable, harmless. But today, their mistake stood right in front of them, steady, prepared, and unafraid. "You wanted me to sign your papers," I said as I turned toward the door. "But I came here to sign your ending." The front door opened just as I finished speaking, and Mark's voice broke through the tension. "Hannah." His footsteps echoed against the hardwood floor as he stepped into the room, confusion written all over his face. "Dad said there was something urgent." "What's going on?" The color drained from Diane's cheeks. Frank shot Tom a sharp look, but no one answered. I turned toward Mark, meeting his bewildered eyes. "They invited me here to sign divorce papers," I said evenly. "Apparently, they thought ambushing me would be easier than telling you the truth." His brow furrowed. "Divorce papers? What are you talking about?" Frank rose from his chair, trying to sound calm. "Son, please. Sit down. This isn't what it looks like." "Then what is it?" Mark demanded. "Because it looks a lot like my family trying to kick my wife out of my life." Diane stepped forward. "Mark, sweetheart, your wife has been stirring up trouble. We were only trying to protect you from more stress." I could almost taste the poison in her tone. "Protect him," I said quietly. By forging his name on a loan, Mark froze. "What?" His eyes darted between us. "What loan?" I handed him one of the papers from my folder. "The one your father opened last month. $120,000 using your signature. Except this isn't your signature, is it?" He took the paper, studying the page, his hands trembling. "Dad." Frank's jaw clenched. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," Mark said, voice rising. "Because this looks exactly like fraud." Diane stepped in quickly, voice cracking. "We only did it because the business needed it. You would have said no, and we were desperate." "Desperate enough to steal from me," Mark shouted. His voice filled the house raw and betrayed. I reached for his arm gently. "There's more," I said, handing him another document. "Tom's gambling debts, Lydia's fake invoices. Every dollar they lost came from your accounts." He sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the papers, lips parted in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. "All of you." His eyes landed on each of them wide with horror. "You lied to me. You used me." Lydia stood up, shaking her head. "That's not true. She's making this up to turn you against us." I cut her off before she could finish. "Then explain these," I said, sliding over a printout of her bank transfers to Derek Miles. 4 transfers in 1 month each, just under $5,000. "Why just under the reporting limit, Lydia?" Her face went pale. "You can't prove anything." I smiled faintly. "I already have." Tom cursed under his breath. This is insane. You've gone too far. No, Tom, I said quietly. You did years ago. The room was silent except for Mark's shallow breathing. He looked at me, his voice breaking. How long have you known long enough? I said softly. I wanted to be sure before I said anything. But when they tried to push me out, I had no reason left to stay quiet. Mark looked down at the papers again, then at his father. His hands shook as he dropped the documents onto the table. I can't believe this. You always said family was everything. Was that just for show? Frank's face twisted with anger and shame. I did what I had to. You wouldn't understand. You're right, Mark said bitterly. I don't, because I'd never destroy the people I love to save my pride. Diane reached for his arm, her voice soft. Please, honey, we can fix this. He pulled away sharply. No, Mom. You've done enough. He turned to me, eyes wet but clear. You were right, he said quietly. I should have listened. I nodded, the ache in my chest heavy but clean. You needed to see it for yourself. As Mark stood beside me, the Boyds sat frozen, a family exposed by their own deceit. For the first time, Mark wasn't standing with them. He was standing with me. The silence in the Boyd living room stretched until it felt suffocating. Mark stood beside me, staring at the papers like he could will them to disappear. Frank's face was a storm of anger and shame. Diane's fingers trembled against her pearls. Tom and Lydia fidgeted like children caught stealing from a store. I had seen numbers collapse before, but never people. You've always had a problem with authority, Frank said, finally, his tone low and sharp. You think you can march into this house and talk down to us. I'm not talking down to you, I said, keeping my voice calm. I'm talking to you like adults who need to face the truth. Diane's composure cracked. Truth, she spat. You think you're so much better than us? You don't even belong in this family. You never did, I noticed, I said dryly. Especially when you handed me divorce papers you didn't have the courage to show your son. Her jaw clenched. We were protecting him. Mark turned to her. From what, Mom? From his wife? From reality. His voice broke slightly. You lied to me. You used me. How is that protection? Watch your tone, Frank snapped. No, Mark said, stepping closer to him. You watch yours. It was the first time I'd ever heard him speak to his father that way, and something inside me shifted. Frank's glare moved from his son to me. This is your fault. You've poisoned him against his own blood. No, Frank, I said evenly. You did that when you forged his name on a loan. Tom let out a shaky laugh, trying to cut the tension. All right, enough. Let's not blow this out of proportion. We can figure it out. I turned my eyes on him. Figure it out. You took money from your brother's joint account to pay off your gambling debts. You didn't even try to hide it. You labeled the transfers vehicle repairs. Tom's smirk faltered. You can't prove that. I already did, I said, sliding another document across the table. The bank statements don't lie. You do. He went quiet, his face hardening into something ugly. Lydia, who had been silent until now, leaned forward, her tone mocking. You've been snooping through our finances. That's illegal. It's called marriage, I replied. And your family's financial disaster happens to have my name attached to it. I reached into my folder again, pulling out the printed emails between her and Derek. You were helping your little boyfriend move money through your boutique, weren't you? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Frank's head whipped toward her. Lydia, what the hell is she talking about? She's lying, Lydia blurted, but her voice cracked at the end. I dropped another sheet onto the table. Bank transfers. 4 this month, each under $5,000. You were careful to stay below the federal reporting threshold. Smart, but not smart enough. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Frank's face darkened to a dangerous shade of red. You did what Lydia's voice trembled. I was helping a friend who took your money and left you holding the bag, I said. You funneled money from your father's accounts to cover your own mess, and then you blamed Mark for being the disappointment. Frank slammed his fist against the table, the sound loud and sharp. Enough. But the damage was done. Every secret they'd buried was bleeding into the open air, and there was no stopping it now. Mark turned to his father, his voice cold. You forged my name. You stole my money, and you tried to destroy my marriage to hide it. You don't get to shout at anyone anymore. Frank's lips pressed into a thin line, but he said nothing. The weight of his family's lies hung between us like smoke. I straightened the papers, my heart pounding, but my hands steady. You tried to erase me, Frank. You should have checked the math first. Diane let out a quiet sob. The sound was small human, but too late. The Boyd family was cracking right before my eyes, and this time, no one could glue it back together. The air in the Boyd living room felt thick enough to choke on. Frank's fist still rested on the table knuckles, white veins bulging. His jaw twitched with restrained rage. You come into my house, he growled, and you think you can destroy everything I built. I'm not destroying anything, I said, my voice level. You did that yourself when you decided rules didn't apply to you. His eyes burned. You think you're clever, Hannah? You think you can outsmart me with your numbers and your little papers? No, I said softly. I don't think it. I already did. For a moment, the only sound was the old grandfather clock ticking behind us. Then the storm broke. Frank lunged forward, grabbing the papers from the table and tearing them in half. This is garbage, he roared. None of this means anything. It means everything, Mark snapped, stepping between us. You can rip up every copy in this house, Dad, but it won't change what you did. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket and held it up. And it won't matter anyway. I backed everything up. Diane gasped. You wouldn't dare. I already sent copies to the bank and our attorney, I said quietly. The truth's not going away this time. Frank's breathing turned shallow, furious. You're bluffing. Try me. Lightning flashed outside the window, thunder following close behind. The power flickered, and in that half-second of darkness, I saw the fear on Diane's face, the guilt on Tom's, the humiliation on Lydia's. When the lights came back, it felt like no one in that room would ever look the same again. You ruined us, Diane whispered, her voice trembling. No, I said, locking eyes with her. You ruined yourselves the moment you treated me like a stranger in my own marriage. Lydia jumped up, her face streaked with tears. You don't understand. You've turned Mark against us. No, Lydia. Mark said, his voice low and calm. You did that when you lied to me. Frank's face reddened again. I won't let you destroy this family. This family was already destroyed, I said coldly. You just didn't notice because you were too busy pretending it was perfect. Tom threw up his hands. All right, enough. Everyone needs to calm down. But no one was calming down. Frank's rage was a wildfire now. He turned to Mark, his tone harsh, commanding. You're my son, and you're going to fix this. Tell her to hand over that folder and end this nonsense. Mark's eyes hardened. No. What did you say? Frank barked. I said no. Mark repeated louder this time. I'm done being your puppet. Frank took a step forward, but Mark didn't flinch. You've lied to me, stolen from me, and now you expect me to cover for you again. No more. Diane's voice cracked as she tried to step in. Please, honey, don't do this. We can make it right. You can't make right what you never intended to fix, Mark said sharply. You just wanted to keep control. Well, you lost it. Frank's hand trembled, pointing toward me. She's manipulating you, Mark. She's using you to get to us. No, Mark said quietly. She's the only one who's ever told me the truth. Diane sank into her chair, tears finally spilling down her face. We did it for you, she whispered. No, Mom, Mark said. You did it for yourselves. The thunder rolled again, closer this time, rattling the window panes. I stepped forward, gathering my folder, my voice calm even as my pulse hammered in my ears. You wanted to erase me, but instead you exposed yourselves. Every lie, every secret, every dollar you stole. Frank's glare could have cut glass. You'll regret this, he hissed. Maybe I said, turning toward the door. But at least I'll regret it with my dignity intact. As I reached for the handle, lightning lit up the room once more. The Boyd family sat frozen in their own wreckage, faces pale illusions shattered, their empire of manipulation collapsing right in front of them. And for the first time, I felt no fear, only justice beginning to breathe. I had almost reached the door when Lydia's voice sliced through the silence behind me. "You think you've won?" she shouted, trembling with rage. "You're nothing without us, Hannah. You were nobody before this family." I turned slowly, keeping my expression calm. If being a Boyd means lying, stealing, and stabbing people in the back, then thank God I'm nobody. Her laugh was sharp and mean. "You'll walk out of here with nothing. That's what happens when you cross us." I looked at her for a long moment, then smiled, small, cold, certain. "That's funny, Lydia, because I'm not the one about to lose everything." She froze. "What do you mean?" I walked back toward the table and pulled out one last document from my folder, a bank statement printed in blue ink. "Remember your boutique?" I asked lightly. "The one you told everyone was thriving because of your good taste." Her eyes widened. "What about it?" "Turns out it's been funneling money to a personal account under a fake business name." Care to guess whose I dropped the statement onto the table? The name on the transfers was clear Derek Miles. Tom leaned forward, frowning. "Who the hell is that?" Frank's head whipped toward his daughter. "Lydia." She was already backing away, her face draining of color. "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think I said quietly. You've been transferring money to your boyfriend for months, hiding it under false expenses. You didn't just help him, you committed fraud." Diane gasped, clutching her pearls so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Lydia, please tell me this isn't true." "She's lying," Lydia snapped, but her voice broke halfway through. I took another paper from my folder, a screenshot of Lydia's messages to Derek. "Then maybe you can explain these." "Just moved, the rest Dad will never notice." Or this one, "Once he signs off the house, we'll be free." The room exploded. Frank's roar filled the air. "You stupid, selfish girl! You could have ruined us all!" Lydia screamed back, tears streaming down her face. "You already ruined us, Dad. I just did what I had to do." Diane was sobbing now, rocking slightly in her chair. "Stop it, please, both of you." Mark turned away, shaking his head. "My God, all this time." I stood there quietly watching them devour one another with words sharper than knives. "This is what loyalty looks like in your family," I said, "secrets eating you alive." Lydia spun toward me, her mascara running. "You don't get to stand there and judge us. You're just the only one who told the truth." I interrupted. "Maybe that's why it burns." Frank grabbed Lydia's arm. "Do you have any idea what you've done? If this gets out, we're finished." "It already got out," I said. "The bank flagged the transfers this morning. Derek's name was on the account, and now the investigators know yours, too." Lydia's knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Diane looked up at me, her voice small and broken. "Why are you doing this?" "Hannah," I met her gaze. "I'm not doing anything. I just stopped covering for you." Mark turned to his family one last time, his face ashen. "I don't even recognize you people anymore." Frank tried one last desperate reach for control. "Mark, don't let her turn you against us. We're your blood." Mark's voice was cold and certain. "Blood doesn't mean a damn thing when it's poisoned." The storm outside raged, louder wind rattling the windows. I stepped toward the door again. "You wanted me gone," I said, my voice steady. "Well, you got your wish. But you're the ones who'll be left with nothing." Frank's face twisted. "You'll regret this, Hannah. You'll wish you'd never come after us." I looked over my shoulder. "Maybe. But by the time I do, you'll already be behind bars." And with that, I left them standing in their once proud home, the truth bleeding through every wall like rain through rotted wood. The storm finally broke that night, tearing through Maple Grove with wind and thunder that rattled windows for miles. I lay awake in bed, listening to the rain slam against the roof. Every flash of lightning reminded me of Frank's red face, Lydia's tears, Diane's trembling hands. For the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid of them. I felt free. By Monday morning, the Boyd name was on every tongue in town. People whispered in the grocery store aisles, at the diner outside the post office. Frank's company, Boyd & Sons Agricultural Supply, had been hit with a full audit. Word spread fast that he'd been forging loan documents and using Mark's signature for years. The bank froze their accounts and the sheriff's office paid the estate a visit before noon. Carla called me that afternoon, her voice half concerned, half impressed. "Girl, what did you do?" I smiled faintly, staring out the kitchen window as rain dripped off the eaves. I stopped keeping their secrets. The news moved quickly from financial trouble to scandal. Tom's gambling debts surfaced when his bookie, someone named Ray Givens, filed a complaint after Tom couldn't pay back nearly 40 grand. Lydia's boutique shut down overnight, her online store taken offline after the authorities traced her transactions to Derek's fake company in Kansas City. Derek, of course, vanished the moment investigators showed up. Diane refused to leave the house. Neighbors said wandering through the kitchen in her robe, crying into her coffee. Mark drove out to the estate that evening. I didn't go with him. I sat at home, the silence around me heavy but peaceful. When he came back hours later, he stood in the doorway soaked to the bone. His face was pale, his eyes distant. "It's all gone," he said quietly. "The business, the money, everything. They're selling the farm to pay the debts." He sank into a chair, his hands shaking. My mother looked at me like I was a stranger. I nodded slowly. "You are to them. You finally stopped doing what they wanted." He looked up at me, guilt shadowing his expression. "You were right, Hannah, about everything. I should have protected you from them." "You couldn't," I said softly. "They don't understand love without control." He reached for my hand, his voice trembling. "Can we fix this us?" The question hung between us like smoke. I thought of the years I'd spent trying to belong, of the nights I stayed silent to keep peace, of the endless fights smoothed over with forced smiles. I wanted to say yes, but the truth was heavier than hope. "Mark," I said gently, "I loved you, but love can't survive in a house built on lies." He blinked and tears filled his eyes. "So that's it?" "No," I said. "That's freedom." For a long moment we sat in silence, the rain softening outside. Finally he nodded. "I'll sign whatever you need. The house should stay with you. You earned it." His voice cracked. "I'll never stop being sorry." I reached over and touched his hand one last time. "Just stop being blind." When he left, I watched his truck disappear down the muddy road, taillights flickering through the storm. The house felt quiet in a way that wasn't lonely, just honest. The peace I'd wanted for years didn't come from forgiveness or revenge. It came from finally choosing myself. The next morning, a knock came at the door. A deputy handed me an envelope court summons for Frank and Lydia Boyd. Inside was a note from Grace Allen, the attorney who'd been helping me. Just 4 words written neatly in ink. "It's beginning. Be ready." I closed the door, leaned against it, and exhaled. The storm outside had passed, but the reckoning had just begun. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and rain. The hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp, but Grace Allen, my attorney, was already waiting when I arrived. Her dark suit was pressed her folder thick with exhibits. She gave me a small nod as I sat beside her. "You ready?" she asked quietly. I took a breath. I've been ready for years. Across the aisle, the Boyd family sat in a stiff line. Frank's face was pale but defiant. Diane looked smaller somehow, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. Lydia avoided everyone's gaze, her lips trembling, while Tom sat rigid, his hands clenched on his knees. The weight of their empire had finally turned to dust. The judge entered, and the murmur of the courtroom died instantly. Proceedings began with Frank's attorney stumbling through excuses, misunderstandings, family disputes, errors in documentation. Grace rose calmly, her voice like steady rain. "Your Honor, these were not mistakes. These were deliberate acts of fraud committed over years designed to exploit the victim's trust." As she spoke, each document I'd uncovered appeared on the courtroom screen, the forged signatures, the transfers, the fake invoices. My stomach twisted, but I didn't look away. The truth deserved to stand in the open. The turning point came when the bank representative took the stand. He confirmed everything: the forged loan, the false collateral, the withdrawal patterns traced directly to Frank and Tom Boyd. Each fact landed like a hammer. Diane began to cry quietly, her hand covering her mouth. When Lydia's turn came, she refused to look up. The prosecutor asked if she recognized the bank account under the name D. Miles Consulting. Her silence was her answer. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Boyd, do you understand the seriousness of this? Lydia nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice broke. I was trying to help someone I loved. You helped him steal, Grace said softly. And in doing so, you helped destroy your family. When it was over, the judge's decision was clear. Frank received a suspended sentence and heavy restitution. Tom's debts forced bankruptcy proceedings. Lydia was placed on probation with community service and a criminal record that would shadow her for years. Diane wasn't charged, but her name was permanently attached to the financial scandal. As for Mark and me, the court recognized that the house deed, the joint accounts, and the remaining assets belonged solely to me. Grace slid the documents across the table, her voice even. The property is officially yours, Hannah. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of it. For so long, that house had been the battlefield of their control. Now it was mine, quiet, empty, and honest. Frank turned to me as we stood to leave. His voice was low, hoarse. You think you won? I met his gaze without flinching. No, Frank. I think the truth finally did. Diane tried to speak, but no words came. She just stared at me, eyes hollow, as though realizing the story she'd written for her family had ended without her permission. Mark waited outside in the rain, his coat damp, his face drawn, but calm. It's done, he asked. It's done, I said. He nodded, swallowing hard. You saved me from them. You had to see it yourself, I said quietly. That's the only way it would mean anything. He looked away, the rain streaking down his cheeks. I'm sorry, Hannah. For all of it. I know I said. And I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. He nodded again, understanding. You're stronger than any of them ever knew. As I walked away, Grace fell in beside me. You did good, she said. I looked up at the gray sky, the clouds finally breaking into light. No, I whispered. I just stopped pretending they couldn't hurt me. Justice wasn't loud. It didn't always come with applause or revenge. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, written in ink and law. And as I stepped into the rain, I realized this was the sound of peace beginning. 6 months later, the Boyd name had all but vanished from Maple Grove. Their farmhouse stood empty, shutters closed, the for sale sign leaning sideways in the weeds. People still whispered about them, how pride had turned to ruin, how lies had burned through generations like dry wood catching fire. But no one mentioned my name in the same breath anymore. And that was exactly how I wanted it. I'd moved to Nashville into a small brick apartment above a bookstore that smelled like coffee and paper. It wasn't fancy, but every corner was mine. The first night I slept there, the silence felt different, warm, clean earned. I unpacked slowly, placing my ledgers and files onto the shelf, the same ones that once held the proof of the Boyd's corruption. But this time, the numbers were mine, records of something new I was building. I had started a small consultancy called Ledger and Light, helping women who'd been financially manipulated by spouses or family reclaim their independence. My first client, a single mother from Kentucky, cried when I showed her how to open her own bank account. My second, a retired nurse, sent me a card that read, "You saved my life." I pinned it above my desk. I didn't think of myself as a savior, just someone who'd learned the hard way that silence protects the wrong people. Some nights when the city lights shimmered against the windows, I would think about Mark. He'd moved out of Maple Grove too, taking a small mechanic job in another town. He sent one letter, short, careful handwriting. He said he was rebuilding, learning to live without the noise of his family's expectations. I never wrote back, but I hoped he found peace. We were both ghosts of the same war, and that was enough of a connection. On my 38th birthday, Carla drove down to visit. She leaned against my balcony railing, sipping iced coffee. "You really did it," she said, her voice proud. "You got out." I smiled, watching the evening sun stain the sky orange. "I didn't get out," I said. "I walked out." She laughed softly. "And that's why I'm proud of you." After she left, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. I hadn't written in months. The last page still held the list I'd made the night before the courthouse hearing. Fear, proof, freedom. I drew a line through the last word and wrote a new one beneath it. Peace. Sometimes I still dreamed of the Boyd house, the echo of Diane's voice, the heavy tick of that clock, the way Frank's glare could cut through a room. But when I woke up, the dreams faded like mist, and the sound of the city replaced them. Every morning, I made coffee in my small kitchen, opened the window to let the light in, and reminded myself that survival wasn't just leaving, it was learning to live again. That spring, I held a workshop for women at a community center downtown. One woman raised her hand, her voice shaking. What if standing up for yourself means losing everything? I looked around the room at faces that had known the same kind of pain I once lived with. Then you start again, I said. But this time you build it on your own terms. And you never let them make you doubt your worth. The women nodded, some with tears in their eyes. And I realized this was my real victory. Not the courtroom, not the headlines, not even the justice. It was this moment turning my own scars into a map for others. As the session ended, I packed my notes and glanced out the window. The sun was setting, casting long golden lines across the floor. For the first time, I didn't see shadows of the past, just light stretching forward. I closed my journal, smiled to myself, and whispered, "This time, it's all mine." It was a quiet Sunday morning when I sat at my desk, a cup of coffee growing cold beside me. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, painting thin gold lines across the papers. I no longer needed court documents, bank statements, all the proof that had once defined my survival. They were relics, now reminders of a war I'd already won. I turned on my camera and adjusted the light. For weeks, women had written to me messages about their own battles, their own families that used love as a weapon. I had promised to tell my story, to show them that the end of something can also be the beginning. When the red light blinked on, I looked straight into the lens and smiled, not for performance, but for peace. They planned to silence me, I began softly. Instead, they silenced themselves. I let the sentence breathe. Then I continued. I used to believe keeping the peace meant staying quiet, that love meant patience even when it hurt. But silence is not peace, it's surrender. The Boyds taught me that. And the day I walked out of that house, I stopped surrendering. I paused, remembering Diane's trembling hands, Frank's fury, Lydia's tears, and Mark's broken apology. You see, betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it wears the face of family, but when people show you who they are, believe them. Don't wait for the proof I did. Don't sacrifice yourself for people who thrive on your silence. My voice softened. I know some of you watching this are in the same place I was, trapped between loyalty and self-respect. Maybe you're afraid to speak, afraid to leave, afraid to lose what little love you still recognize. But listen to me, if that love comes with conditions, it isn't love. It's control. I leaned forward slightly. When I finally chose to walk away, I didn't gain revenge. I gained freedom. And freedom, friends, is louder than revenge could ever be. The camera light flickered as the morning sun shifted. Outside, children's laughter drifted up from the street. I smiled again. Justice doesn't always look like a courtroom or a headline. Sometimes it's a quiet morning where no one can hurt you anymore. It's waking up without fear. It's knowing the only approval you need is your own. I took a slow breath. If you're watching this and you've been made to feel small, remember, your silence feeds them. Your voice frees you. Protect yourself emotionally, financially, legally. Pay attention to the small lies before they grow into cages. And never, ever let guilt keep you chained to someone who benefits from your pain. My eyes stung a little, but I didn't blink. So tell me, I said softly, have you ever been told to keep the peace while being broken inside? Have you ever stayed quiet just to keep someone else comfortable? I tilted my head slightly. If you have comment below, tell your story. You never know who might need to hear it. Then, with the calm certainty of someone who had earned her truth, I added, and if you believe in standing up for yourself and walking away from people who try to define your worth, hit like, share this story, and subscribe. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting back. It's thriving without them. I turned off the camera and sat there in the quiet hum of my apartment. The video would upload later that day. Maybe it would reach hundreds, maybe thousands. But even if it reached just one woman sitting in the dark, wondering if she was strong enough to leave, I knew it would be worth it. Outside, the city was alive again. I picked up my coffee, now lukewarm, and smiled. For the first time in years, the story was mine, told in my voice on my terms. The past was over, the debts were paid, and peace finally was the only thing left worth keeping.